Preparing. See, now it says live up there, but I'm not sure it's live yet. I don't know. There's a little bit of a lag. So we may be live.
It says meeting is now
Wait,
streaming live. Let's go.
We need a better.
All right, Todd, nice to see you. You got
too.
to move your hand a little bit. I can't see the book. You usually have the book right in there we go. Yeah. It's usually over your shoulder, which is like a I don't know, an infant's blanket to me. When I see the book, when I'm looking at you, that's like super reinforcing. And I got so excited last time I decided to put the entire book, Inbound Organization, as my background. And we got a guest star for this session. Super excited about talking with Ben and find out about his background and his experience as an inbound person. And to have Todd walk through a variety of real world kind of questions and experiences to get Ben's perspective in the mud and the slime.
Well, I'm glad to be part of this. Thanks for inviting me.
So Ben, tell us about, let's talk about where you're from. I love where you're from.
So as far as I live in Nashville now, grew up in Houston, Texas, been here in Nashville since the 98. And so I've gotten to see the city just grow and become kind of like what I call a mini Austin. In fact, pre-pandemic, I used to say we're one South by Southwest away from becoming Austin. And hopefully as we're all as the pandemic is thawing and we see events kind of coming back, that maybe we can actually make that true. But it's been a great place to live. And it's been a great place to raise our family.
So tell us the weirdest thing you've seen on Zoom calls during COVID.
The weirdest things, the weirdest things is that people don't pay attention to the angle of where their laptop is. And it's always the most important person in the room most often, who is the least equipped. And so it's really hard to take them seriously on Zoom because they haven't taken the time to figure it out. And so they've gotten better at it. But it's been interesting to watch how certain levels of leaders have adapted to technology, and had already adapted coming in the pandemic, and how they grew over time.
Yeah, if I see one more ceiling fan, I'm like, guys, come on, cut it out, right? I want to see your face or just an avatar. It doesn't really matter, right? Yeah. If you're in your bunny slippers, I don't need to see any extra bits or anything like that. All I want to do is make sure that we have a professional meeting. Yeah. Oh, and my big thing is I'm not doing 7-minute meetings. This is not really inbound organization stuff, Todd, but I'm like, all right, I'll meet for 7 minutes. And people are like, what? I'm like, anything that we could talk about for 45, except Ben. Ben can go on for a long time and it's all meaningful. Ben, I told you I'd give you a shout out for your newsletter because I love your newsletter.
Thank you.
Your newsletter, I read and it's meaningful. It's like, how long does it take you to write your newsletter?
A few hours, but that's because I spend a lot of time thinking through it and researching it. I mean, that's typically how I write.
You can tell. You can tell. You're a smart guy. That's why we want you as a guest, right? And you're embedded in the inbound revolution. You understand it, right? And so that's important for our audience. Because as we were talking today, Todd, our audience is kind of all over the place, right? It used to be, right? We carefully select the participants of the Facebook Live monthly meeting, right? Because number one, we want to reinforce the concepts. Number two, people are at different stages of migrating over to becoming an inbound organization. And Todd, wouldn't you say people come up to you all the time and ask, how do I become an inbound organization?
Yeah, we get that a lot, and it's been interesting. I'm fascinated by the people that read the book. I'm going to address that first. We've had just in the last week or two, I've had people that were solopreneurs comment on. We got reviews on Amazon, which have all been great. Talking about this gave me a good overview on how to market my kind of solo business, all the way up to I'm starting a project with a client that's a $10 billion company that is, their senior marketing and salespeople read the book and want to adopt ideas across this big company. And we've had people in the media space, industrial, manufacturing, services, agencies, kind of all over, in just about any industry you can think of, kind of adopt the ideas. And I think that's right. I don't think what we wrote about and the idea of the inbound organization is that you're building an attractive company that all parts of your company are attracting the right people to you, and you're creating this amazing customer experience. You're building enterprise value as you do it. And I think that's the message people want to understand. They want to know. And I think COVID's accelerating that. We talk about COVID being an accelerator. I think that's accelerating that trend where people want to understand not just what to do in terms of do these 3 steps or do this one or these tactics. It's how do I build the company? Like, how do I act? How do we think? How do we create mindset? How do we create processes and basically enable our people to build this organization that attracts people? Because it needs to be the whole organization. It can't be just the marketing department. You can't just rely on the product. Competition is too tough for that. So that's a long-winded answer, Dan, but that's where I think we are.
So the way, I mean, the book is required reading for all of my clients, period. They're going to get a copy of the book. It's going to be the first thing that they do in preparation for our first meeting. It is so foundational. It really is a primer into that whole, way of thinking. And it really is a shift in thinking. But I think everything that you're talking about, Todd, became true, particularly over this last year. In the industrial age, it was all about what product could you make, how much could you make it, and how cheap could you make it for? And it was all about perfecting the process, and everything was about the product itself. In this next generation of business, what everyone was awakened to that hadn't already made that transition is it's all about the relationship with the customer. At the end of the day, the pace of change is happening so fast that you're not afforded the opportunity for decades of improvement. We're talking about rapid innovation, which also means rapid extinction, which means we're going to be starting, creating, launching, and killing products faster than we ever have before. So what's the real asset? The real asset is the relationship you have. And inbound organization, as far as I'm concerned, makes the case for building your entire company around a responsive relationship with your customer. And if you live in the pain with your customer, if you live in their problems, see the world from their eyes, you will not only link to them in ways that are meaningful and material, but you will evolve with them over time. In the same way that my relationship and how I related to my boys when they were 5 is very different than how I relate to them now at 14. Doesn't mean that I'm no longer their dad. It just means that relationship has evolved over time. If I didn't evolve with them, it would be a very ineffective relationship at this point. And so I think that is, for me, that's how I really think about this, is that you need to build your organization around your greatest asset, and that's your customer. And if you have that relationship, manage that relationship, invest in that relationship, they will tell you everything you need to know to be successful.
Why will they do that? Why are they willing to share all of that stuff? Because that's an important foundation.
Well,
First of all, not everybody believes that. Product managers all over the world are like, no, they buy my product, right?
Yeah. And that's fine. There are also certain people you put in front of a client, and there's certain people you don't, right? Product managers aren't always the people that you take to the table because they don't listen, right? They already come. So this is one of the things that I love about a concept that I got from the book, How Google Works. And one of the characteristics that they look for in employees is what they call smart creatives. So these are generalists. So interestingly, that Google, engineering, hiring the best minds in the world, are looking for generalists who are curious about the world and about solving other people's problems. And I think that's a really great way for us to be able to do that. So clients, the market will tell us their problems. First of all, they're always telling us. We just have to create the avenues to be able to listen. And they're telling us because they're trying to solve their problems. They're not trying to solve our problem. They're trying to solve their problems. And that's what we need to link to. That's what we need to have a relentless commitment to doing. So it really is a strategic growth initiative begins with strategic listening. And they will tell you by what they do and by what they say. And we used to accomplish this, right? By flying people in, putting them up in 5-star hotels, paying for really nice dinners, and then we would put a product in front of them and we'd say, would you buy this? Well, of course they're going to say yes. What we actually can do now in real time is actually see, are they engaging with the content? Where are they engaging with it? Are they buying the product? How long are they buying the product? Who's buying the product? What are they doing with the product? And all of those wonderful things that, that UX and CX has brought us to be able to look at is now influencing not just the technical aspects of that relationship, but also the relational aspects of that. And that's probably the hardest jump, because the people who have had success, and this is where I find the biggest gap, the people who have had success, who are in those decision-making roles, aren't aware that things have changed. And they're living so closed to confirmation bias. They're living so close that if we need to drive sales, then doggone it, get the book of lists from the Chamber of Commerce and go make some more cold calls. And they just have completely broken that relationship, that listening pipeline with the market that makes it possible. So if you're not listening, somebody else is, and that's what organizations need to be paranoid about.
And there was a ton in there, and you touched on a topic that I've really been spending a lot of time on lately. And Dan and I had a conversation about this last week. That it goes back to a quote in the book. Actually, Frank Ozier. We ask him the question, "Who's most important, your customer or your employees?" And his response was priceless. It was, "Who do you love more, your mother or your wife?" And that's the right answer, right? It's both. And you kind of just said that. And again, the customer, you have to have that relationship, right? But the other piece is, and we touched on this a lot in the book, but I think there's a lot more to go here, where it's kind of the habits of the people on your team, right? The characteristics of the people on your team are either going to be conducive to listening and being responsive, or they're going to be conducive to doing a task list or checking off a box, right? And I'd love to hear your feedback on this question. I see a lot of agencies struggle with that, where companies hire an agency and they struggle with the task mentality versus the why are we doing this? Should we be doing this? Is this what our customers want us to do mentality? That I feel like a lot of agencies feel like they got to push stuff through a fire hose. Hey, we just got to do it, even though it might be mediocre and our customers don't want it, because it got this kind of task mentality. Do you run into that at all?
Oh, absolutely. So first of all, we're still running knowledge-based organizations like we ran industrial organizations. Mm-hmm. We broke down each part of the assembly line into individual pieces, and we've said, don't worry about what's in front of you. Don't worry about what's behind you. Worry about what you're tasked to do. So if I'm on assembly line at a GM plant and my job is to screw the bolts on the bumper, and I see that the window isn't assembled, correctly, I can't comment on that, because my job is to put the bolts on the bumper, just like the guy with the window can't comment on how I put the bolts in the bumper. And until and what happens with that is groupthink, right? We slip into a very myopic worldview. We only pay attention to what's in front of us, and the standard is what has been represented for us. So we're now living into generational roles in some of these larger organizations where we have more inherited behaviors than we have strategic behaviors. And the people who actually made the strategic decisions aren't around to comment on the assumptions that were true at that time. So we haven't evolved with the market. And so we've created that by how we've designed the organization. The other thing is we need to reframe the problem that we're solving. And if you reframe it around what's the value that needs to be created, or what's the ultimate outcome that needs to be measured, and allow that to shape the individual outcomes, tasks, or steps along the way, that leads to a very different answer. And so if my job is to check all the boxes, it's really irrelevant if that creates value for somebody else. What matters is, did I check all the boxes? But if the value is I need to increase this portfolio of customers by 10%, then that forces me to think in a much more comprehensive way and get off the kind of the starting block around saying, all I need to do is make sure that I do what's right in front of me. And this is why I think team-based leadership is so important. We've got to have interdependent, interdisciplinary teams. I mean, this is where, this is where we need to take engineering and bring them with marketing. We need to take, the technologists, and we need to bring them to sales. And we need to let them live in each other's worlds and understand that when we have a greater appreciation, I don't want to make every technologist a salesperson, and I sure as heck don't want to take a great salesperson and make a technologist. But if they can appreciate how they're all looking at the same problem from different vantage points, then we can actually have the opportunity to look at something in a new way and kind of break out of that myopic view. And the example I always give with that, and I'll shut up here in a minute. The example I always give with that is at MD Anderson. We've all been to doctors, right? You go to one doctor and they tell you need to go see this specialist, this specialist, this specialist. 9 visits later, nobody knows what the heck the other doctor said. You're just supposed to assimilate it all together. And by the way, most of us haven't been to medical school to make sense of all. But at MD Anderson, it's literally a 360-degree view of a patient. All of the doctors are collaborating together under a shared base of information, and they are looking at how their individual specialties impact or respond to the other efforts and strategies that are taking place, because the whole goal is health and recovery of that particular patient. And I think that's what has to happen in our organization. We have to fall in love again with the people that we're trying to serve.
So I've got a very specific question related to that conversation. I think that's fantastic. I think you're absolutely 100% correct with what you're saying. If you were going to build a marketing team today, what would it look like? Because a traditional team is going to be, we're going to have a leader. We may have a project manager, might have a content writer, maybe have a social media person. Again, it's kind of the siloed effect. You have your role, right? How would you build a team today?
So
Dan, I want to hear your thoughts on that question too, Dan.
And I've actually done that. And I always start with, I send everybody in marketing, if they're an existing team, I send them everybody in paired up with a salesperson into the field. I want them to hear the objections. I want them to experience the intensity. I want them to see the doors close. I want them to hear the phone being hung up on. I want them to see how difficult it is sometimes for salespeople to get the enablement materials that are needed or to weave through things. I want them to feel what it's like at 2 a.m. to roll into the Holiday Inn and try to log into a CRM and input information from the previous day's meeting and then get ready for the next day's meeting. Because when they live in that tension, then they realize that their job is a part of, it's not just to support the sales team, but it is part of that sales experience. And so I think in the same way that I like to send salespeople into the marketing world to appreciate it. And this is where we've got to stop looking at the separation between sales, marketing, and service. I mean, that just has to go away. This is your client, customer, donor, constituent, solutions team. And together they bring different individual disciplines to the table to solve a single problem. How can I better define what the pain is that the prospect is living in? And how can I provide a bridge to a better tomorrow? And I think when we start incentivizing that behavior, when we start monetizing that behavior, when we start to change the scorecard around that behavior, then I think we really will see systemic change. But in lieu of that, we build marketing departments and we lob them, every COO in the plan, CFO on the planet lobs them under corporate allocation, right? Which means that they're an expense. An expense is one of those things that gets constrained the second there's any disruption in revenue. And then salespeople are just the opposite. And I'm a salesperson, so I've benefited from this. It's like, what do you need in order to deliver on it, right? So you've got marketing people over here that are making bricks without straw in many organizations, and you got salespeople that are in a lot of ways wasting money because we're just trying things and we're not really understanding it in relationship. And then once we hand it off from the salesperson, we don't have a good way of maintaining an exceptional client experience, so that we don't have to win them back again, or so that we don't actually enable a detractor in the marketplace by somebody who jettisons off. So I think what I would do is cross-train and cross-expose all aspects of that client solutions team together and start to build common frameworks from leadership process, workflows, and measures that leads to a common scorecard that's aligned with corporate initiatives.
Dan, what do you think? What would be the ideal?
I like that. We've written extensively about one view of the customer. And the key is, as I'm thinking, hearing you talk, Todd, we optimized for efficiency internally in the 80s and 90s. That's Deming. That's all of the great philosophers that and business coaches in my generation, because there were only 6 competitors. And it was all about our internal efficiency because we could afford to do it. Now, Todd, do you know how many competitors the average company has in 2020?
47.
44, right? Unbelievable. I know. 44 competitors. Now, if you optimize for your internal efficiency, what happens? I love the quote. Put that in the comment section. If you're not listening, somebody else is. Now, what the global economy and the global pandemic has shown is that everybody's under scrutiny, right, to ensure they have a extraordinary customer experience, because exactly what you said. To do that, you have to have a central view of the customer. To do that, you have to have the technology where the salesperson understands what the marketing person is doing. That's schmarketing. Say it, Ben. Say schmarketing.
Schmarketing.
Yeah, I know. Todd, say
Love
it.
it.
Say it.
It's marketing. There's no
marketing.
In there.
You got to do it like you're a Brooklyn rabbi. Marketing, like yeah. There you go. And then Todd, you always make the point, but Dan, it's not about the sale, right? It's about starting the relationship, right? Mm-hmm. In the book, I think it's chapter 9. You talk about no. We've got to drive as much value as possible. It comes from Todd's background as a inventor and as an industrial guy, where buying it is easy. Right. What you really need to do is start getting value from it. And the quicker the end user customer can get value from it, to do that, right, the implementer needs to understand, oh, you had this question during the sales process. You're a little worried about this. If you don't have one view of the customer, a central view of the customer, there's no way you can do that. You don't have the continuity. You end up asking the same questions all the time. In 2002, if I asked you the same questions all the time, you're like, okay, you just don't talk to Todd. Now in 2021, you're pissed. You're like, wait a second. I talked to Todd about this last week. It should be in your file. And you're like, sorry, Ben, I don't have that. And it gets the relationship off on a wrong foot. So this is essential. This is now table stakes. This is exactly how and why people need to become an inbound organization.
Well, first of all, Dan, you called me an inventor. So I'm pretty excited about that new title. I do have 3 patents, but I've never been called an inventor.
Okay, so you invented those patents, and you're a super smart guy, and you're so humble you would never say that. So I'm Todd's unofficial PR.
So wait, it reminds me of the people that describe themselves as serial entrepreneurs or thought leaders. Whenever I hear both of those, if you're self-describing yourself as a thought leader or a serial entrepreneur, you're definitely in the jerk category, and you're just like self-absorbed. I can't stand either of those.
Hold on a second. Let me take that off my LinkedIn profile right now.
Well, other people call you a thought leader, right? And
I get what you're saying. First of all, Todd is such a nice guy, right? He doesn't have these airs about him, right? He wants to get in and help, right? Your whole thing, both of you guys, right, are a great inbound people, even before we started talking about inbound, because you lead with help. And Todd, how long have you been leading with help?
My dad taught me this when I was a kid.
How about you, Ben? Why did you start leading with help and putting out the newsletter and starting your radical consulting company? Why did you do it? How did you learn to start with help?
Yeah, it goes back to just my fascination with understanding how other people view the world. I mean, this goes back to I remember I got to take a humanities class in high school, and we spent a semester on world religions, and the other one was world philosophy. And I became fascinated with the stories that we tell ourselves and how they shape the world around us. And so that became just like a commitment to understanding how other people view the world, which became really the basis of curiosity for if I can understand where you believe there are gaps, then I can be part of that solution. And then just some really great mentors.
Yeah, with more competition, what you see is no one wants to be qualified or closed, right? Everybody, it's what you said in the first 5 minutes, has problems that they want somebody to help them with, right? And so when we're all connected, right, the ability for me to understand your problem or Todd's problem, lead with that, right? Be focused on where you can provide the best value. The riches are in the niches, which is we talk about all the time in the book. One of the 6 core tenets of an inbound organization is that you find out where you do your best work. You focus on those folks because by definition, you'll get a better reputation, you'll get add more value, and you'll grow your business more quickly. That is still hard for lots of entrepreneurs to embrace, but an essential part of the inbound organization.
Absolutely.
Well, this is fun. This is typical. We were 25 minutes in, and we have not asked Ben one question that we prepared for before we started this.
I'm going on mute. All right.
No. It's great. I love it. Again, I want to stick with this idea of we talked about inbound organization, right? And I think we're getting to the point where it's more like inbound people. And you started to hit that when you talk about like what Google says, they wanted smart creatives, people that were curious, solving problems. What are some of the characteristics of people that are successful at this? Because not everybody's successful at it, right? If you think you can just vomit out blog post after blog post and garbage social media posts and spam people with emails and hit the lists that's inbound, I think you're wrong. Yeah. So what do you think some of those characteristics of inbound people are?
So I'm gonna borrow from our friend Patrick Lencioni in his ideal team player, and he identifies 3 different characteristics: humble, hungry, and smart. You got to be humble enough to recognize that you don't already know what the problem is that the other person is trying to solve, which is going to make you want to figure that out, which means you start with questions. No one wants, it's interesting. Tom Peters did a speech, and he said, what was the average amount of time that Harvard Business School came up with between the time a doctor entered a room and asked the patient a question until that doctor interrupted that particular patient. And the finding was 18 seconds, which is about the length of time that most salespeople spend before they start going. They ask a question, about 18 seconds in, they interrupt the prospect and they say, oh, blah, 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 blah. And then they just like passion vomit all over. So, I mean, humble means that you're willing to ask the question and that you're willing to do enough research to know the right question and that you're willing to listen to the question. Hungry is that you are out there in search of, like there's something driving you that is trying to figure out who are those people that I can help. And if I can't help them directly, do I know somebody who can help them? And call it karma or whatever, but if you become known as the person who solves people's problems or connects them with people who can solve their problems, you become invaluable. You also become the first person that they call when they run into an issue. And any leader in any growing organization, it's not, do I have a problem? It's which problem is most on fire today. And if you can be part of that. And then smart, I think really means that you're willing to educate yourself. Smart is not, I know everything. Smart is I'm willing to understand the sources of information that my prospect is reading, the latest research and findings from the industry that are out there so that you have a good understanding of general trends, but also specific contextual trends that really are nuances that are very important in shaping the application of the strategy. So humble, hungry, and smart, I think, are an easy way to be able to think about who's an ideal inbound person.
Excellent. Interesting. So I know you talk about RevOps, and this is one of my terms that I'm still getting my head around. Talk about how you define RevOps and how it helps. What's the value of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there are 4 things that I think, people benefit from when it comes to revenue operations that need to be addressed. We have to align teams. We have to simplify technology. We have to eliminate complexity, and we have to drive revenue. Those are the 4 things that a revenue ops strategy ought to be able to deliver on. And I've yet to meet a leader that believes that they're capitalizing on all 4. And if they do, then I pay for an hour of their time and listen to what they've done, because they clearly are doing something exceptionally well. But I think revenue operations acknowledges the fact that operations has to be at the strategy table. I think far too often, we have this myth, particularly in Western world and in American culture, that one individual smokes a pipe on a mountaintop, comes back with this brilliant idea, draws it out on a whiteboard. The leadership team goes, fantastic, hands it off to operations, and operations looks at it and goes, oh my God. Like, there is so many problems with this. And then when you come back and ask those questions, the strategy people are like, what's your problem? Your job is to make it work. And when in fact, we actually need to have everybody looking at the same problem from different vantage points. And so revenue ops is being able to put the revenue generating aspects or functions within a company on a single spine, so that you can normalize definitions, measures, workflows, and systems, so that you actually have a way to collaborate. It's like creating a laboratory. It's almost what I sometimes call a strategic learning model, where you have a continuous feedback loop so that you can make ongoing improvements through that process. Another way that I like to describe it is growth architecture. If you build a skyscraper without a strong foundation, the building will collapse on itself. But if you create the architecture, if you create the infrastructure necessary to sustain it, you will not only be able to repeat it, you'll be able to measure it, and you'll be able to scale it, and you'll be able to do it in a way that's profitable and functional. Because you can grow an organization without the right architecture that will collapse on itself. You can actually sell your way into failure. But at the same time, just as much as you can not sell your way and not get enough revenue in that as well. And I think the speed in which we're moving, the complexity, the need to be able to look at it from multiple vantage points, the need to be able to do micro pivots as well as macro pivots that happen within hours of a campaign launch, as well as months or weeks or quarters into a larger corporate initiative to drive revenue across, has to happen in such a way that it's coordinated, that it's efficient, that it is easily adaptable, and that everyone knows what's happening in real time. So with new information, they can make new decisions. That's what revenue ops, as far as I'm concerned, is a superpower. And it is what will separate organizations who continue to grow from those organizations that grow incrementally and in spurts.
So what do you think the biggest hurdle is to transitioning to a revenue ops model?
So the biggest in my mind is that we have to get everybody appreciating and understanding that we've actually got to redefine, in most cases, the business rules and the business workflows, because all of them have evolved over time. They're either learned behavior, inherited behavior, or they haven't been documented in forever. And so we need to reestablish what's most important. And what's most important has to be able to be measured. And I kind of think about it in a frame, focus, grow mentality. We have to get really clear around what current reality is. And the competing narratives at the leadership table of what current reality is astonishing. These are really smart people, really successful people. So it's not critical of what they bring to the table. But the fact that they can look at a single problem from so many different vantage points, it's no wonder they can't get the organization moving in the same direction, because they themselves don't agree what the problem is. And this is often due to an absence of data, or an absence of data that is either actionable or trustworthy. And in absence of that, you are filtering everything through your own confirmation bias and through your own presuppositions that you bring to the table. And that's what sinks into sales saying, I just need more salespeople. Marketing, I just need more money for this. Operations, I just need more money to hire more data folks so that we can finally get the data that we need. And the CEO is like, his head's about to explode, or her head's about to explode, because they're just tired of more without that. So once you have a clear sense of current reality, then we have to be unbelievably focused around what success is. And many times executives think that they can take a 12-month goal and transition that across the company, and that's just going to work. And it doesn't. It fails because most people can't see 12 months in advance. So not only do we have to say, how do we quantify what growth and what success is, we have to be able to take that and break that down into quarters. And I'm a big fan of 90-day sprints. And when I've led teams, I take those big 12-month number, break it down into 4 quarters, and each quarter, I have each team member contribute to breaking that down into monthly milestones, weekly commitments, and daily tasks, so that we know every 5 to 7 days, are we on track or off track? We know every 6 weeks, are we going to hit our quarterly numbers or are we not? And we know every quarter, how are we in relationship to that 12-month number, which gives us 4 pivots within every 12-month cycle to actually be able to hit that number. And the amount of learning that happens in that, the amount of action and movement that takes place, the collaboration that takes place is really powerful. And then that last part of actually growing is that if you in fact are doing those other 2 things, you have enough to be able to build your organization on top of a single technology spine, which means your access to real-time data gives every single person by role and by function the ability to see what's necessary for them to make the same or a new decision. And that's where you start to get into measurable, repeatable, and scalable growth, because you're able to see what's the formula, and then let's keep fueling that formula until we see a permutation that allows us or requires us to be able to make some type of adaptation. So when it's functioning in its fully functional form, we're able to frame, focus, and grow.
We've talked a lot about kind of the centralized view of the customer. You've talked a lot about sales enablement and tools. What is that kind of, what does that backbone look like? Is this a CRM? Is it a combination of marketing automation, CRM, and other tools? What is the kind of, practically, what are the things you have to do to be able to deliver on the RevOps idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are 4 components: people, process, revenue, and growth. You have to have the right people in the right seats. I mean, that's, that is an overstated and underappreciated function. And this is even true on sales teams. We ask people who are really great at being farmers to go out and hunt for a new acquisition. And that's an unfortunate frustration that leads to lack of performance. And then we end up, bouncing really good salespeople just because we didn't align them with the right objectives. In the same way, we ask our hunters to go grow crops, and that just isn't going to happen. You want those out there. And so we have to understand team dynamics. We have to understand the inefficiencies and the deficiencies that exist within the team dynamics, and we have to be able to orient those to our strategy appropriately. So that is a key piece of defining role, expectations, and all of that. Process, we have to have clearly defined process. That is important for leading to technology, because oftentimes we take technology and try to fit the business in the technology versus the other way around. We actually need to take the business and find the technology that makes that work, which is how a CRM, if you don't do that work right, CRM doesn't work. Well, probably that's not true. It's probably your organization hasn't been defined so that you understand how to use that CRM in order. But, we've all used multiple CRMs and some of them don't work at all. But if we define that, then we've got the process part of it. The revenue part is we've got to figure out what are the inputs and outputs that are actually going to drive it. How do we do things like lead generation, opportunity development, pipeline velocity, conversion, and then how do we manage retention and upgrade? And all of those things are core into understanding how we use technology and data in order to drive that. And then that last part of the growth part of it is how in fact do we align the outcomes to the core achievements of the organization to be able to deliver the value that's necessary. So yes, the functional components of that, you have to have really smart people in the right roles. You have to have very defined processes that constantly need to be evaluated based upon new information. You have to have a single technology spine that allows you to manage across those customer segments of marketing, sales, and service, and operations, so that you can have a single language, if you will, that everybody is speaking with single generally accepted rules and measures. I mean, one of the first things I do in almost every organization is do a 10-year look back on all transactions. And one of the most common things that I find is every leader of every department likes to redefine the measures to their advantage. And so when you normalize that, then you realize what's actually true. When you find out what's actually true, then you can actually take action. So that's really key. And then finally, with that, once you have that single technology spine, agreed upon measures, defined workflows, really smart people in the right roles, now you can have meaningful, actionable conversations around, are the results that we're getting, how do they align with what we intended or preferred future? And then what changes do we need to make, and how does that impact the system? If we do that in order to get a different output. I mean, mathematical theory at its core, you cannot come up with a new result unless you change the variables. But until you understand the variables, you can't control the equation.
So Ben, let's change gears a little bit here. We're kind of heading towards the end of our time already. I can't believe we've been here 40 minutes. Tell us about your business a little bit, and who is your ideal buyer?
Yeah, absolutely. So Velocity was really born out of a gap that I saw at the executive level and really rebuilding and leading turnarounds inside organizations, in the sense that I had access to really smart consultants who could come and tell me all of the gaps, all of the flaws, all of the root cause, and leave me with opportunities that my team couldn't take action on. And that just was an unbelievably impotent exercise, because now I knew that I knew what I needed to do and that I didn't have the capacity to take action. So it wasn't very helpful. And then I also had access to a ton of agencies, and most agencies have a menu of items, core competencies that they can help you scale very efficiently, which is what they're designed to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a really smart consultant either. You need both of those, but when you're truly trying to lead change within an organization, there's a third component, and that is, how do you loop in your leadership so that everyone's looking in the same direction, everyone's rowing at the same speed, and that you're all going after that same target. And that requires a coordinated effort between information and insight, as well as action and execution that leads that together. And so Velocity was really, how do we create a process by which we can lead edge initiatives that don't disrupt the core, but that lead to maximizing insights and new growth formulas that can then be integrated back into core operations. And part of how I've kind of, even though HubSpot and Ben professionally have kind of existed on these parallel tracks, this is what led me smack dab into the HubSpot universe and inbound, is that I could take people oftentimes right up to the point of implementation, but without providing them a flexible and powerful and configurable system, it never led to that type of sameness of language, measures, and process and structure that ultimately drove the type of change that I was trying to create. And so this is where, for me, revenue operations took a very conceptual concept. How do I bridge the gap between where I want to be and where I am into something, a practical, implementable, tangible outcome that can actually make it possible for me to make it true. And so Velocity is all about eliminating the obstacles for ambitious leaders to be able to make the change and grow the value that they want to see take place in the world. And we're going to do that through creating a culture of learning, where we're going to bring everybody, we're going to bring really smart people to the table. We're going to create a common sense of language and measurement frameworks that's going to allow us to lead smarter, make smarter decisions, and lead to more informed conversations that are going to drive one thing: ultimate lifetime value within the market and their ideal customer target. And I'm telling you, it has taken off like a rocket. And if you've ever been tied to a rocket ship before, it's an unbelievably exhilarating experience. And again and again and again, what I find are leaders desperate for clarity around what's happening within their organization. And once they have that clarity, they feel unbelievably empowered to change their future. And that's what we're trying to do.
So who are your ideal buyers? Who's the ideal client for you?
So for me, I spent a lot of time in 3 different sectors. One is professional service organization, one is technology and software companies, and the third is what I call causes. And so these are leaders in organizations probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 million to 50 million in annual revenue. They probably got 20 to 30 employees minimum. they're probably running somewhere between 78 and 82% utilization from that measure. And they're trying to figure out how to grow at scale without just pouring money into new people, new projects, new campaigns. And so they're really living at the edge of the success of their current mode of operation. And in order to achieve that next level, they have a general sense that current course and speed is not going to get them there. And that is the intersection and moment in which I'm able to help them create clarity around their current reality and move them forward.
Ben, you've been a fantastic guest. I always measure the interest level when the time goes fast for me. I'm hoping it's interesting for everybody else. We dropped the link to your website in the comments. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
Read the book. Read it once, read it twice, read it a million times, hand it to every client. I'm telling you, I cheered you guys on every time I flipped the page because I've lived every single concept that's there. I've lived it forward too, because, having kind of bought into the inbound revolution, probably in the mid 2000s to late 2000s. This is why I think it's, in some ways me finding HubSpot, mid 2020, it was like meeting a sibling I didn't know I had. It was just like running into myself, and it's like somebody understands me, and somebody built an entire way for me to help other people experience what I've experienced, what I've been able to do within organizations, and what I've been able to do piecemealing multiple pieces together. And now we have a single integrated system that makes it possible to really achieve the growth, that growth potential that leader knows but doesn't understand how to tap into. So read the book.
Well, thank you for that, Ben. I think I'm going to take this segment of the video and just put it up as a testimonial, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
That was unsolicited, so it was natural. So thank you. Yeah. Ben, you've been fantastic. I really appreciate you being on the show. Dan, thanks as always for being here. And any final thoughts, Dan?
Next month, Ben, awesome. We have to have Ben back again at some point in time to talk about the way in which you manage this change, right? Moving to an inbound organization. Next month is Mike Ewing, right? Mike Ewing, who is HubSpot renewal manager, right? Who talks about how you engage with your customers for a higher retention. He's always a great guest. Super excited to catch up and see what new information Mike will share with our listeners.
Yeah, Mike is one of the smartest people I've ever talked to when it comes to customer success and customer retention. He is a bona fide expert at the topic. So we're looking forward to talking to him next month. And Ben, we'll see you in Nashville someday soon, and we'll see you back on this show also. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. It was a blast.
Bye, everybody.